Hi, everyone, and welcome to Brian's Horror Corner. I'm your host, Brian, and welcome to day 27 of my 31 horror movies in October Halloween series. And so today we're going to go ahead and take a look at a pretty well known vampire movie from the 80s, a pretty fun one. I had to get a vampire movie on here before we reach the end of the month here and the day of Halloween. So we're going to go ahead and take a look at The Lost Boys from 1987 that I have on Blu ray here. Sleep all day, party all night. It's fun to be a vampire. That pretty much sums up this movie, The Lost Boys from 1987. So let's just go ahead and get into it with the setup, the premise, and the cast, and then I'll get into my review, which will be spoiler free. So, The Lost Boys is a 1987 American supernatural horror vampire film directed by Joel Schumacher, produced by Harvey Bernhard, with a screenplay written by Jeffrey Bohm. Janice Fisher and James Jeremias wrote the film's story. The film's ensemble cast, we'll get into that in a minute here. So basically, the film opens Michael Emerson and his younger brother Sam travel with the recently divorced mother Lucy to the small beach town of Santa Carla, California, to live with her eccentric father, referred to simply as Grandpa. Michael and Sam begin hanging out at the boardwalk, which is plastered with flyers of missing people, while Lucy gets a job at the video store run by a bachelor, Max Lawrence. Michael becomes fascinated by Star, a beautiful young woman he spots on the boardwalk, though she seems to be in a relationship with the mysterious David, the leader of a young biker gang. In the local comic book store, Sam meets brothers Edgar and Alan Frog, a pair of self proclaimed vampire hunters, who give him horror comics to teach him about the threat they claim has infiltrated the town. Michael finally talks to Star and is approached by David, who goads him into following them on a motorcycle along the beach until they reach a dangerous cliff, which Michael almost goes over. At the gang's hideout, or hangout, a sunken luxury hotel beneath the cliff, David initiates Michael into the group. Star warns Michael not to drink from the offered bottles, telling him that it is blood, but Michael ignores her advice. Later on, David and the others, including Michael, head to a railroad bridge where they hang off the edge over a foggy gorge. One by one, they fall, Michael falling after them. So that's a pretty interesting setup and premise to this movie. Don't want to give too much away, as the movie did not either for the first third of it anyway. Very mysterious tone. So, cast wise, we have Jason Patrick as Michael Emerson, Corey Haim as Sam Emerson, Kiefer Sutherland as David Powers, Brooke McCarter as Paul, Billy Worth as Dwayne, Alex Winter as Marco, Diane Wiest as Lucy Emerson, Corey Feldman as Edgar Frog, Jameson Newlander as Alan Frog, Jamie Gertz as Star, and Edward Herman as Max. So yeah, that's the setup and the cast of the Lost Boys from 1987. Very interesting and sort of different vampire movie, a different take on the vampire movie. Of course, there's been lots of vampire movies made all the way back to Dracula in 1931, up until today when they're still making it. But this is a very different kind of take, very 80s. So let's just get into it with my pros. It's actually the first time I've seen The Lost Boys, which is hard to believe, from 1987, but I really enjoyed it overall. It's a very stylistic and unique vampire movie that really stands by itself in terms of its mood, its tone, and its filming style, especially. It really makes for kind of a unique vampire movie that I haven't seen before. Now, I did review Fright Night as part of my May 31 horror movies earlier this year. You can check out that review on my channel. That's that one's always kind of compared to this because they were both made in the 80s. But I think they're pretty different vampire movies myself. Both of them are wonderful, and I could watch either one of them anytime. Um, but has a very different, just a very different tone and atmosphere and style. Really, style's the thing I keep coming back to in terms of how they made this one. You got to start with the camera work, especially. It's really effective with the overhead shots and the panning shots that they use. The overhead shots right off the bat of the carnival scenes. the movie opens at a carnival, and we see all these overhead shots of like a roller coaster and stuff. And also the filmmaking, the camera work that really gives a sense of mysterious vampires, the sense of attacking, even though you don't actually really see much, especially the first half of the movie. Um, it's just a really cool camera work, though, that even holds up well today. I mean, it kind of lets you know what this movie's going to be about in a very mysterious way. Very effective, in my opinion. Um, you have a whole bunch of memorable and likable characters from the Lost Boys. Basically, the Lost Boys themselves, like David, Marco, etc. And then, of course, the brothers of Michael and Sam, the Frog Brothers. They're all pretty effectively written characters that are also well acted for the most part. But yeah, they're just very well known characters that showing most of them right here that you know people know about in the horror genre, especially in the 80s horror movies. But yeah, they all have sort of a compelling story, and they all, for the most part, have good character arcs as well from the beginning to the end of the movie. So that's definitely something that stands out. It's an extremely well paced movie that effectively delivers the character arcs I was talking about, as well as a fun and engaging story overall. A lot of vampire lore as well. They have an interesting take on the lore that we've heard about before about vampires and scents. That this movie really brings across. Things like garlic and sunlight and inviting a vampire into your home that are very effective. Great practical effects in this movie that still hold up today, especially the makeup effects and sort of the facial look of not only the vampires but uh, like the melting and decaying and the injured vampires as you see towards the end of the movie. Just fantastic special effects, practical makeup effects, very very good, and definitely add a lot to this movie. And then, of course, how can you talk about this movie without talking about the music and the overall soundtrack of the movie? Definitely adds a lot of that. Adds a lot of the rock and roll feel that you get in the 80s, sort of the punk rock kind of feel. It really fits for the time as well as for this particular movie. And then it's got a really fun third act to the movie with a great battle that has a great payoff for the most part of what we've been set up for the first two-thirds of the movie, and also has a pretty nice twist at the end, which I have to admit I didn't see coming. I didn't expect it, so it worked for me in that regard. They do a really good job as well. Another pro of combining humor, and it's humor that's not overly silly or forced. This isn't considered to be a horror comedy. It's a supernatural horror vampire film. But there's definitely comedy in this movie, but it's comedy that works within the movie. Um it's kind of hard to explain. Hopefully you understand what I mean. There's some comedy that's forced and shoved down people's throats when they're watching it. But this movie really isn't like that. I really felt like the humor was effective. And then you combine with that the fact that it also has there's still a serious tone to this movie and has horror to it as well. So just a great combination of the humor and horror that a lot of movies try to do, and a lot of them don't succeed. Fright Night did a good job with this, although Fright Night was a little bit more of a horror comedy. Like the tone of that movie was more light, and they were going more for humor, but I thought that humor worked effectively. Where this is actually more of a serious tone for the most part. There's some 80s, certainly 80s cheese moments, but not as many as you get in other 80s horror movies. But they keep a pretty serious tone when they need to with this movie to still make it a horror movie and not a horror comedy. But the humor elements are certainly there, and it just works. It just works in this movie, and then it also has a very high rewatch value. It's so entertaining and fun from beginning to end. It's not boring that I could put this movie on just about any time. And then I have to mention that I really like the look of the Lost Boys lair or cave that they're in. I thought they did a really good job, very effective look there and setting for that. So yeah, those are all my pros. I could probably find more if I really wanted to. You got to give Joel Schumacher credit too for a guy that kind of got took a lot of crap for some of the Batman movies he did in the late '90s. He actually directed some good movies, and this is at the top of the list. I know he did other ones too that they're escaping me right now. But this is probably his best, certainly one of his best, which is good. Rest in peace, Joel Schumacher, who just passed away last year because he takes a lot of crap for the Batman movies, and certainly they're not great Batman movies. But this is a really good directed movie by him. Just the camera style alone, as I said, is just great, and then everything else he does with the humor and the horror and the characters. Very well directed. There are a few cons that I'll get into. None of them are really big. They're kind of nitpicky, but it's really not a scary movie, even from even if you're watching it from sort of not like a disturbing horror, but it's even not scary from like a fun horror. There's a few scenes that are effectively creepy, especially like I was talking about with the effects and the makeup. But it's more of a fun and vampire lore kind of stylish story, with a few creepy moments. Definitely not scary though. There's also not a lot of blood or gore in the movie. It's not really the style that they were going for. The little bit of blood and gore we get, they're kind of it's quick and then cut away. It's not like you see somebody's head get cut off and blood squirting out or anything like that. Which again, to me, that's not necessarily a con, but I know it could be for some people. One thing that I would have liked to have seen was to have more vampires in this movie. There's only about five or six characters overall, and four or five of them are the teenagers in this movie that are basically shown to be vampires. I think it would have been more effective to have 15, 20, even 30 vampires show up throughout the city that they're living in. I just think it would have given it higher stakes. And I know they had a budget with this movie, and I don't think it was an overly big budget, but a very effective budget. They used it well. But that's just one thing that stood out to me. And then I have to say too that the final act and the climax, even though I enjoy it and it's fun, it does feel a little bit rushed. Like the pacing speeds up a little bit more. I think when you get to that third act, where it feels like they were kind of running out of time there, and that's just something that was noticeable to me. I still felt paid off enough, but it could have been a little bit more from the rest of the movie. Like I said, it does feel a little bit rushed, but that's really all I can come up with for the cons, guys. This is a fantastic, it's a great '80s movie, a great stylistic '80s vampire movie with great music and rock and roll, great characters, good directing, and awesome cinematography and camera work, as well as practical makeup effects. So, yeah, I'm going to give this movie a 9 out of 10. It's just a really good vampire movie from the '80s, The Lost Boys from 1987. 9 out of 10. Go ahead and comment down below what you guys think of The Lost Boys. If you've seen it, I would recommend it. Even if you're not, even if you know you're not going to be totally scared by it, it's still just a great movie, well made, technical movie, and really fun. Just really fun and entertaining. So comment down below what you guys think of it, if you've seen the pros and cons. Like this video and hit the little notification bell below so you don't miss any of my upcoming videos, including the last few days of this 31 horror movie series that I'm taking a look at. And also, please subscribe to this channel so you don't miss my other great horror content that I have coming up as well. So, thank you for watching this video. Have a great day and stay scared. Bye.